My name is Phil Ryan, and I've been a musician pretty much my entire life. And I've grown up in the UK through a history that's included iconic events like moon landings and national strikes, fall of the Berlin Wall, wars, disaster, royal deaths, political upheaval. But, however, through it all, I think I've lived observing history from the outside, watching things and world events unfold around me, but I've never been directly affected by them. Not really. Until Friday the 20th, March 2020. Because that was when COVID-19 arrived, the virus, and then everything changed. I live in a very tucked away corner of North London. It's a nice place. Old Victorian Edwardian houses. Some houses, most divided into flats, and I rent a small flat on the third floor of an old Victorian house. And I've lived here quite a long time, really. And my downstairs neighbours are great. We all get on really well, and I'm really lucky they're such lovely people. And just like everyone else, I sat and watched the news of the worldwide pandemic slowly unfolding. It really started in February. We were watching the news from China. It looked terrible, but it all seemed so far away. And probably like many people at first, I didn't really get how serious it could become. But then the new reality set in, and it set in pretty quickly. Because death had arrived, invisible and deadly, right in our midst, right at the start of spring. And that was when everything changed. A word I'd never really heard before appeared. Lockdown. And accompanying it was a new threat of death, because COVID-19 was killing people, thousands of them. Now we had to stay inside. We had to avoid people. We had to wash our hands a lot. And going outside was limited to brief exercises, walks and shopping trips and emergencies only. We had to wear masks. And socially distancing became a new phrase, because the new state was lockdown. The key point for everyone was we had to stay at home, because they said it was the only way to stop the virus spreading through the population quickly. So we had to isolate ourselves from each other. And these new phrases became part of my language then. Self-isolation, social distancing, lockdown. And now I watched as my musical colleagues and contemporaries, they all moved online. There was no live music. People weren't going out. They weren't allowed to. And soon people were giving performances from home. And there were countless websites springing up with singers and players singing their songs, favourite songs, cover songs. Famous musicians could be even seen playing in their kitchens. And live streaming soared. So music was out there, but it was online. It was on TV. It was on a screen. I even thought about doing it myself, and I started to film and record a few songs just for my YouTube channel. I even toyed with a live streamed Facebook thing, but I like live music. It's my favourite medium as an artist. It's been my entire life. I like a show with an audience you can get to see and speak to. So anyway, one morning in lockdown, as I sat eating my porridge, a random thought hit me. I suddenly felt people just like me were probably struggling to be locked inside on their own. Many people in my area living alone, just like I did. And there they were, stuck inside, watching TVs and computer screens. Struggling with a lack of human contact, seeing and meeting other people, family. Because all of that was missing now. A few days earlier, I'd watched a YouTube thing with some guy in Italy playing a trumpet on his balcony, just to cheer up his neighbours. And they all came out, and you could see them clapping and cheering and laughing. And I thought, what a wonderful idea. And then suddenly it struck me. I know. That's what I could do. I could play. Outside in my tiny strip of laughingly described front garden, because it faced the street. I wouldn't be on a balcony. No. I'd be on the street. Maybe I could do a little show, a mini concert, 30 minutes long or something. Just me, a guitar, an amp and a mic. People might like that, I thought. So there it was, the idea, just a little mad. But then I figured these were pretty mad times and normality seemed to have vanished. Now, with the outbreak of the COVID virus, which became more deadly and obvious and serious, one of my neighbours, a lady called Jill, had sent out an email announcing her idea of setting up a neighbourhood WhatsApp group. And she said she thought it could help everyone stay in touch and could let everyone check on elderly and vulnerable residents in our surrounding streets. And I thought, what a lovely idea. And it took off. And I mean, really took off. Countless neighbours and locals immediately signing up. And they told other people that weren't on the list. And other local groups joined, bringing their members. The Friends of the Local Park being one really wonderful group. And in my eyes still, Jill was and still is a complete and utter local hero. I mean, because what she did was simply amazing. You see, you've got to understand, for many residents, it became an instant lifeline. There were people joining, offering help every day. I read innumerable small acts of kindness and support for strangers, from other strangers. Neighbours helping neighbours they'd never met mostly. And there were people posting tons of useful information, where to get deliveries, and they got elderly residents shopping. They told you about specialist stores, they donated equipment, and people got together. Some made PPE for the NHS at home, masks and things. And they arranged help and post office stuff, giving away things, food and streamers and vegetable boxes and bikes and trampolines and games and puzzles and furniture. You name it, it was out there and it was there for free. In my book, it was simply kindness writ large. And a real community spirit emerged, and it was practical and solid. And it all came together in the face of a deadly virus. So anyway, I finished my tea that morning and I got on with some writing. But still the mad idea persisted. And I thought about it for just a few more hours. But there it was, buzzing away at the back of my mind. So as a first step, I posted my idea on the growing local WhatsApp group I just told you about. And I said I was thinking about playing outside, giving a little live performance, just a couple of songs. Live, fun, from the house's tiny front garden area. By the way, it's about 12 feet wide and runs in front of the house, ending where the rubbish bins are. So at Kew Gardens it isn't. Anyway, 2 people replied saying they thought it was a nice idea. And I'd suggested 7 p.m, but one person, a local mum, she'd asked me if I could maybe play at 6 before the children's bedtime. That way the children could see it too. And I thought, why not? And so, the following Friday at 5:30, on a late March early evening, I lugged a guitar amp, a microphone on a stand, my acoustic guitar and a music stand down 3 flights of stairs. I mean, who needs a gym? It was a bit chilly out in a tiny scrap of garden. Optimistically, I like to call that area the wildflower garden. In other words, it's an overgrown mess. And it's got blue flowers and green stuff. I think weeds, I think they're called. So there I was, late March. And the sky was bluish, but the temperature was a bit chilly and there was a slight wind. Now, rather presently, I decided to take a flask of hot tea with me. Not very rock and roll, I know, but I was really glad of it as the time passed. So there I started to set up my gear. I dropped a power cable out my top floor window, and I'd left a note under the door of my neighbours warning them what I was going to be doing. And I stuck my little Marshall 50-watt guitar amp, not sponsored by them, up on top of a rubbish bin. And then I set the microphone and the music stand up. It felt a bit weird. I was standing outside the front of my own house, looking at a completely empty street. I had a warm jacket and a scarf on, and despite that early evening March sunshine, the blooming wind was feeling pretty nippy. The street was eerily empty, completely silent. No movement, no cars, no voices, no building noises, no people, nothing. Now I need to point out at this point that luckily for my idea, again, I live on a corner. So my little tiny front garden area looks out over quite a wide bit of quite side road that goes off in 3 directions, and directly opposite me and up all the sides are lots of houses, mainly broken up into flats. So I checked my watch. It was 6 o'clock. And so I began to play and sing. Now, as you know, it's my job, and usually I only play my own songs. I generally play in Europe at festivals and shows, but that day I thought I'd only play mainly cover songs. I thought people would probably like to hear familiar tunes. And I planned a maximum 30-minute set. Although I thought I'd probably play until it didn't feel appropriate. That was my plan. I didn't want to upset people and disturb their peace. However, I thought, it's only 6 o'clock on a Friday night. Maybe people wouldn't mind. And to be honest, I really didn't know what the reaction would be. So off I went. Within minutes, various windows of the houses opposite began opening, and people were waving, and I waved back. And soon there were other smiling people now coming outside in jackets and coats and sitting on garden walls or just standing listening. Then a few more people wandered out into the street. And that's when it really started. By the end of my little show, there was maybe 30 or 40 people, now in windows on the pavement, sitting on garden walls, and all standing safely distanced apart in the wide street. There were others in gardens, and they clapped and they sang along. It was really nice. No one was close to anyone. It looked pretty safe to me. And most people, I could tell, they were 20 feet away from each other, for God's sake. And many, as I said, were inside, in windows, in doorways. I noticed lots of people had appeared with glasses of wine and bottles of beer. And there were parents with children, and some in buggies, and couples, and people on their own, and folks with dogs. They were all ages, the people, not the dogs. And in response to the mum who'd asked me about playing early because of the children's bedtime, I'd learnt some kids' songs and one of them being The Wheels on the Bus. So I asked everyone to sing along and do the actions. And they did, including the kids. It was lovely. From my little vantage point, I could see everyone, and I asked them to wave to each other. And to be honest, I was just making it up as I went along. I was telling terrible jokes, I commented on local issues, and I plugged the local WhatsApp group. And that half hour flew by. But people kept asking me to keep playing. But I followed the old show business rule of don't outstay your welcome and just leave the people wanting more. And I looked at my watch and it was 7 o'clock now, so I thought, time to wrap up, time for the last song. And there was everybody there clapping and yelling. And I decided on the spot to announce I'd be playing the same time, 6 o'clock Friday, next week, weather permitting. And little did I know what was to come. As it turned out, I eventually played a 6 o'clock show for 1 hour every Friday evening for the next 10 weeks. And it became a safe gathering point for my neighbours and locals and surprise passers-by out on the walk. And it really became a popular thing, a local thing, the Friday night show, 6 o'clock. And that really gladdened my heart. Now, there's a video on a different channel, and I want to point out that in 1 month, a company called Curb TV contacted me and they asked me to film some of myself for a TV segment they were thinking of doing, which, by the way, they never use. But so you know, if you do look at the video, all of that footage and stuff wasn't from me, it was from my neighbours. It was sent to me by other people. I even popped up on YouTube all around the world, apparently. And plus, to my amazement, they even did an article about my little impromptu show in the Big Issue. And as those weeks passed, I met people in my area I would never have met, and many of whom I still know to this day, I'm happy to say. And judging by the amount of notes and bottles of wine and chocolates I got, people really liked the show. So on it went. But lockdown was ending now, and people were out and about, and the local high street now looked a bit busier as opposed to the ghost town it had been. So then I decided it was time to stop the little show. Because I figured people really didn't need it anymore. And of course, once again, I never forgot the old showbiz adage, never outstay your welcome. Not as a guest, albeit a brief guest in other people's days. And so the last night came, and foolishly wanting it to be a bit of an occasion, for me as much as anybody else, on the last night I wore a full tuxedo, because I promised everyone I'd really dress up. I'm happy to say a few other people did too. My tuxedo idea, by the way, not such a great idea, because it was 34 degrees and I was playing right in front of the house, directly in the hot sunshine. Whew, that was warm. On that night, I even had a local drummer, Morris, and a keyboard player, Anthony. They joined me. Even a young kid called Vukan on trombone at one point, playing the Star Wars theme. It really was quite an evening. It was, I can't really describe it, but it was just special. But of course, people were out again. They weren't locked down. But I knew that just for a few months, everyone had some place to go, a little escape, a bit of fun, some place to gather in a community kind of way, to see other people, see a show. You didn't need a ticket, you just had to rock up. The Friday night Phil Ryan show. Bring a chair, bring a beer, bring the kids, bring the dog. Feel safe. See other people, sing along. And you know, I don't think I'll ever forget it. And one of the sweetest things that happened on that last evening was Mina, a local resident who I knew really well. She organised a table with hand cleaner, wipes and pens and post-it notes on for people to write me personal messages. And she collected them all and gave them to me at the end of the evening. I put them all in a leather notebook I still have to this day. It really was just touching. And of course I've got lots of stories about all the people I met during that time. To be honest, it was no big deal. It was a small thing, nothing that amazing. But I like to think it was what music's about, doing what it does best, bringing people together, sometimes shining just a little light in the dark, because that's what music does. And to be honest, I'm really glad I'm a musician. I really am.